Very good. All right. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Casey Orvin. I'm the honorary president of the Society for Clinical Research Sites and also the senior vice president of pharmaceutical relationships at StudyKIK. And what we're going to be talking today is about the site landscape. There's so much attention on the pharmaceutical companies and on even the CROs that are involved in our industry. But ultimately, all of us we do what we do every day in order to get vaccines and to get treatment to the patients. And without sites there, we would not be able to enroll successfully on studies. So I always like to start off with we truly are, our industry is a puzzle, right? So each year, the puzzle, I'm kind of an old soul. I love to put puzzles together, but it always annoys me when you get to that puzzle and the one piece is gone. And my kids think it's funny to kind of steal the pieces of the puzzle, but each one of us, in order for us to be successful, each one of us plays a key role, if you would, a puzzle in getting vaccines and getting treatment to patients. And without that site piece, we cannot get those drugs to patients. So it's very important that we focus on the sites, and that really is what SCRS is. Each year, our mission, we have four pillars. We advocate, educate, connect, and mentor. It was founded in 2012. And it was runs from the growing need in the industry to really focus on the site. Christine Pierre was the founder, and she knew that each site's voice would be heard more if we collaborated, if we joined together to really make our voice heard and say, hey, use us, use our doctors, use our principal investigators, use our patient advocacy groups, use us to really take part in creating protocols. If once a protocol is written, let us review it at the site level and see if there's anything that you could benefit from getting our intake into how those protocols would be best used in the public and to get more patients involved in the study. So really the mission is to unify the voice of the sites of the global clinical research site community for the greater site sustainability. What I'm going to talk about today is each year we ask 10,000 sites. So we have a membership of around 10,000 sites around the world, and we ask them to complete a survey. And in that survey, we want them to understand and get their input on what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis when it comes to pharmaceutical companies, when it comes to representatives from those pharmaceutical companies coming out to their sites. So what we do as an industry, here's just an example. We inform, we do several webinars. We have a whole diversity program. I won't go into too many details there, but other way. Sorry, there we go. So 9,500 sites in 47 countries. So we want to make sure that we're not just representing the US, but we are in a global environment, and we need to make sure that we're representing those sites that are outside the US. So we put on conferences in Australia and Lisbon, Portugal, and London, England, Taiwan, all around the world to make sure that we are getting the insight from the whole community and not just the US community. We have a lot of partners that we work with, of course, a lot of the CROs and the sponsors. And you can see here a lot of the pharmaceutical companies that have said, yes, we want to listen to the sites. We realize how important partnerships can be when we're talking with sites, and we want to partner together. So we're appreciative of those. We have site advocacy groups. So those patients and at the site level that are saying, yes, we want to be a part of the industry. We want to be a part of the communication that is being sent out. And it's important that we as an industry, we rely on the patients. We rely on these site advocacy groups and the patient advocacy groups to see if what we're focusing on is indeed what we should be focusing on. At the end of the day, all of our missions should be to get the most effective and safest drugs and vaccines out to the world in the largest amount of people in the shortest amount of time. And I think through this COVID, through the last several months, the last year, it has shown how we can do things differently than we've done in the past. As an industry, we're not known for doing things real speedily, that it still takes a lot of time. And we know that sometimes you can't speed up things. But in the last year, it's shown us that there has been efficiencies in place. that there have been things that we've been able to do to further drug development that we've never done before. And I feel strongly that we have advanced such a powerful and effective way in the last year that we have not done before. We also, before the pandemic started, we had a site initiative or a digital innovation. And it was a new initiative to focus on the future of research, focus on decentralized trials. Are we able to, in our industry, instead of having a patient go to the site 10 visits like stated in the protocol, can 3 or 4 of those be done virtually? Can 3 or 4 of those be done in a tele way, whether it's on your cell phone, on the iPad, a phone call? So how can we do? And we actually put working groups together, not knowing, and this was about a year and a half ago, not knowing that COVID would have the impact that it had on all of us. But we did have a digital initiative where we have sponsors. We have pharmaceutical companies and CROs and patients and sites involved in this digital initiative. A lot of times what we think as an industry, for instance, if we look and say, hey, out of those 10 visits to the protocol is saying must be done at the site, it would behoove us nothing really to then force the patients for 5 of those visits to be done at their home. A lot of patients may not want them to be done at their home. They may not feel comfortable with having someone come into their home. They may not feel comfortable how their home looks, or it's too dirty, or so we can't force the patient to do one or the other way. What we're advocating is for the protocols to be written in such a way that it says you can go to the site or you can go to the home. And giving the patients more freedom to choose, making that patient journey a successful one, and one where they feel empowered, and we make it as easy as possible for them to participate in a research study. And that has a positive effect in a variety of ways. One is that they will want to participate in another study, but 2, perhaps even more important, is that they then tell their friends and their family and their community and their loved ones of what a great experience it was to be involved in that research study. And when that happens, one of the obstacles that we have as an industry is finding enough patient volunteers, finding enough patients that are willing to participate in studies. And our goal can be met, that goal of finding more patients in a shorter amount of time to get this new treatment, to get new vaccines out to the industry. In the last year, one of the benefits, and I know a lot of us have focused on the obstacles and the struggles that we've had in the last year, but for our industry, the world knows about research now, like never before in the last year. They know that there are different phases in research. They know how long it takes to get through those phases. They know what it means to volunteer. And that's something that educating the community is something that is a blessing for us in the industry, because it's unfortunate how the world became, that we had to go through a COVID to get that education out, but it is definitely an advantage and a positive that now the world knows about research. They're looking at our industry. They're relying on our industry. So it's a great opportunity to continue the discussion on what it means to participate in a research study. And we really do need to make sure that that journey that they're involved in is the best journey that they can have. Diversity project as well. It's important that as we go through, we are enrolling the patients in a study that is the makeup of the community that they live in. It wouldn't be right for us to enroll in a strongly predominant Asian community that we enroll 2% of Asians in our study. Same with African Americans, same with whites, same with Hispanics. We've got to make sure that the patients that we're enrolling in represent the communities that they are in. Same with male and female. So it's important that we, and so as SCRS as an organization, we took on that diversity project. So I want to dig right into the site landscape survey. We're going to go over 4 different really functions. One is site financials, what they look like right now, study startup and feasibility, partnerships and communications, and technology. So let me dig right into the site financials. There's a slide for each of those, but I just went through those. So the 2020 Summit Site Landscape Survey. So just to make up, the next couple of slides will show the makeup of those who completed the survey. 2/3 of the respondents were from freestanding and dedicated research sites and private practice groups that participate in research, but they also are a doctor's office as well, and just so happen to participate in research. So nearly 75% of the sites come with over 10 years of experience. So we've got some great experience here. The current data is heavily represented by North American sites. We do have other data for Australia and for the other countries that we're in, but so for this, 86% came from North America. How does this slide gives a good idea on the number of staff that are at these sites. And again, we like to compare, so we're looking at trends. We like to look, the majority of sites surveyed reporting having 2 to 5 full-time study coordinators and PIs and sub-Is at the site. One of the top things the site looks at when the survey every year is where they stand financially, right? It's a very important metric for the sites. Each one of our missions is to enhance medical research and improve the lives of patients all around the world, but we can't do that if we're not able to financially survive as a site. So again, these are not basically, a lot of the feedback is not sites that are attached to a hospital, sites that are attached to a medical university. These are brick and mortar research sites and those sites that are established and integrated into a private practice physician's offices. So we'll talk a little bit about that. From the very beginning of SCRS, and even before, we've advocated for study payment schedules. And for those of you on the call, you may not know that sites were often, up until a few years ago, were paid on a quarterly basis. Okay, I don't know how many of us would be able to survive and would be able to provide for our family if we were told that our employers would now be paying us quarterly, that we would not be paid biweekly, we would not even be paid weekly or biweekly or even monthly, but that 4 times out of the year we would be paid. Okay, it's not acceptable. So we have advocated as an organization and said back to the sponsors and the CROs, we need to be paid at least monthly. And as you can see, that trend has moved upward. In 2018, it was 77% were being paid monthly. 2019, we had a little bit of an increase up to 79, and now we're at 83%. Believe it or not, there's still 5% that are being paid quarterly. But I think we can all realize how important that is to continue that trend. Of all the clinical trial agreements you signed, indicate the most frequent payment terms. And again, quarterly they're trying to still do that quarterly, but the more we push back as sites, the more we push back as an industry, the more we'll be able to provide financially for those sites that are enrolling the patients, that are kind of on the ground doing the work of making sure that patients are enrolled successfully on the study. Another slide, that when negotiating a quarterly or bi-monthly payment schedule to monthly payment schedule, how many times are the sites successful in reaching that? 71% of the sites or most of the time negotiate a better rate, and 51% of the time they are successful. So why do we have 23% of sites never negotiating a better payment term? And that's what we throw out back to the sites and say, hey guys, if we can get to come together and just not accept these terms, that it will benefit us financially. SCRS has made the request directly to sponsors and CROs to release the holdback. And as some of you may or may not know, that the sponsors or CROs, they hold back a percentage of the payment until all the data is included. So they hold back 15-20%. Sometimes over 25%. And again, we're going through the mindset of what we've done for the last 20-25 years. That's no longer acceptable to hold back 25% and expect the sites to continue to financially be sound and to be able to stay open and can keep their doors open, especially during COVID. So one of the things that we did during COVID, which we'll have a slide in just a moment, is to go back to the sponsors and the CROs. And I personally made several calls to sponsors and CROs and said, hey, we need to change this. During this time when many sites closed their doors, many of the studies, of course, we know were halted, were put on the back burner for COVID vaccines, for COVID treatments. And for several months in the April-May timeframe, several of the sites closed their doors and will not be able to open again. So we asked our sites, we said, did your site request for the sponsor to pay paid sooner to assist with COVID-related adverse financial conditions? And as you can see, 55% said no. 20% said yes, and 25% said some trials, but not all of them. And then how successful were they in getting those holdbacks? So you can see they were somewhat successful, but you do have major companies, Pfizer, BMS, that some of them had that in place, that they were no longer doing holdback, and others made that change, that positive change due to COVID, and really showed the sites, hey, we care about you, and that is something that we can give back to you right now. You've done all the work. They may have done the work 6 months, a year ago, and we're just waiting on the endpoints to be achieved. They're waiting on last patient, last visit. But the work had already been done. They had already did the work for the payment. So several sponsors and CROs released those payments, which we are grateful for. This is an interesting that hasn't really changed through the years. We've tracked this number from the start of the organization. 53% of those sites reported having less than 3 months operating cash on hand. So while you can see that, I'm glad that number is trending downward. It is important during COVID, especially, that sites are struggling financially, and we've got to make sure that we keep them in business so that we can again find the patients. I'm going to go through just a little bit more to get off the financials. We talked about operating capital. What was the primary reason for the decrease in operating capital due to COVID? Was the primary reason, and absolutely yes, it did have a major impact. What due to COVID caused the reduction? 84% said suspension of the trial activity, 80% delayed start of trials, 78% reduced trial activity, canceled trials is a big one, increased operating costs, because now you have the PPE that needed to be worn. The several of the coordinators weren't able to come in because of being quarantined, or because now having kids at home and weren't be able to work, delayed payments again. So it really did, as most of us felt, it had a major impact on the site side as well. How would you describe the change in the amount sponsors, CROs are using decentralized or remote monitoring? 80%, of course, said this was increasing. And these stats are back from really November, December. So as we can imagine, that number I would wage to bet has continued to increase. Compensation, additional increase in your site's workload related to decentralized or remote monitoring activities. Yes, from all studies that required increased labor, 45%. Yes, from some of the studies that required increased labor, 28%, they were able to request those and receive those from the sponsors. This is a concerning. In 2019, 17% lost your net profit for 2019. We lost money. So of course, whether you're talking about a site, whether you're talking about a mom and pop shop or a restaurant or any company, you can't lose money and stay in business. So I know we're in a unique time now, but it's a concern of ours financially for these sites that are not attached to a hospital, not attached to a university, or not attached to a school, but they do that as a company, a standalone research center, that they are in jeopardy of bouncing back from this COVID-related events that we've seen. Due to COVID, what caused this loss or decrease? And of course, these are things that we had talked about just a moment ago. So if we look at study startup and feasibility, and many of you on the call, just so the sites are, of course, they are sent a feasibility and said, hey, are you interested in doing this study? Yes or no? A lot of times the sponsors and the CROs will send those out, and the site will say, yes, I'm interested, pick me, I have the patients, I can successfully enroll in your study, and then we never hear back from the sponsor or CRO. So there's a lot of time and energy kind of spent on following up and saying, hey, were you awarded that study, or did this study continue on, or was this study paused or canceled or delayed? So what we do as an organization is say, hey, let us know so that we can then focus on other things if that study is not performing. Oftentimes they will say, okay, we have these 10 sites that we're interested. We're going to send out a clinical research associate, a CRA, and we're going to do a site qualification visit, a SQV. And we're going to make sure that everything that you completed on that survey is correct, that you have the space, you have the patients, you have a lab, you have active coordinators. We're going to go out and we're going to find out if you're a good fit for this particular study. The problem that we have run into oftentimes is that we will have questions, and our doctors will have questions about whatever study it is. Say it's a type 2 diabetes study. And he will have read the protocol and said, okay, so the A1C has to be between 9 and 9.5. What if a patient comes in and has 8.5? When are they eligible when it goes into a 9? And so he's read the protocol. He may have some questions. And what we find is a lot of times those CRAs they're conducting those visits, they don't have knowledge about the study. They may be conducting a visit on Monday for a diabetes study and Wednesday for an osteoporosis study and Friday for a heart failure study. So they're just there as eyes. And we're thinking that's a lot of money and that's a lot of time spent to send out someone that may not be that knowledgeable about the study. So we're looking at how we can work better with sponsors, with pharmaceutical companies and CROs to really make sure that the people they're bringing out are knowledgeable and are able to answer the principal investigators' questions. On the flip end of that, we also from our site say, hey, you've got to be prepared. You've got to have already reviewed the protocol and know what questions to raise and to ask when they're there. So I think it's it really boils down to a mutual respect of their time on both sides, on the sites and the sponsors. So it's not fair for the sites to complain that the sponsors aren't knowledgeable when our principal investigators and doctors may not be knowledgeable. So how often does the CRA follow up with questions raised at the SQV? This is the opposite direction of what it should be. And back in 2018, always 11%, and then always is 7% in 2020. We need that to be a much higher percentage there, and out of, like I mentioned, out of mutual respect. Partnerships and communications, because it truly is a partnership. We asked this question, it's interesting because in some questions there was a wide discrepancy between sponsors and CROs. For this particular question, it was fairly consistent on improvement, but something of interest to CROs, 23% of sites said the response time for protocol related issues had worsened from the CRO. So I think it really goes back to the communication. It goes back to setting expectations on who to reach out to, who is next in line, and making sure that we are being mutually respectful of people's times. Comparing last year, we asked about communication on protocol related questions. And again, there was a significant difference between sponsors and CROs. The sponsors had improved, 31% had improved, where 22% had improved from the CRO world. So we realize there's a lot of pharmaceutical companies, there's a lot of sponsors that aren't able, whether it's manpower, whether it's financial, whether it's just a desire to do a lot of these site-related activities, and that's why they hire a contract research organization. That's why they hire a CRO. But we've got to make sure that those CROs are just as knowledgeable about the processes as the sponsors are. So one of the things that we do in the survey is we find this data so we can go back to sponsors. I've done many discussions and presentations for Pfizer and Janssen and Bayer and all these sponsors that are saying, hey, let us know how we can improve. If we don't know, we can improve. So these stats really help that improvement. What can improve communication between sponsors and sites? It's really building a relationship with them, right? Not having quite as many points of contacts. For the multiple questions, we ask for the most important, and then the second most important, and then the third. And that's why all these don't necessarily add up to 100%. We could then compile the most data to where we could list those that receive the most important vote and those that receive the overall most important. The number one thing was to build and maintain relationship with sites, keeping those KPIs. So treat sites like a partnership and have expectations. If we're starting the relationship over, every protocol that's sent to our site, there's no efficiencies there. And there's got to build that. We've got to start building that trust between sites and sponsors and CROs. The number two is having fewer contacts, and that makes sense. So building the partnership, how sites build their partnerships has changed over the last 2 years. In 2019, again, the number in parentheses is the difference from last year to this year. So more of a partner has increased at both the sponsor and CRO. So we're heading in the right direction. And that makes, SCRS feels good because this is something that we've tackled. How do you feel sites are treated today by CROs and sponsors? CROs extremely positive is 11%, sponsors is 23%. So again, there seems to be a closer relationship with those sponsors and the sites than there are for the CROs. And if you think about it, it does kind of make sense, because if a sponsor has a therapeutic area that they are aligned to, say ophthalmology, say vaccines, or osteoporosis. They're going back to those sites that have successfully enrolled, whereas a CRO may have many different therapeutic areas, many different indications that they're going to those sites for. So it's harder to maintain and build that relationships. Let me, time is so quick. I'm going to focus a little bit on technology. Which of the following technologies are you using or have used at your site? EDC, 92%, ECRFs, 86%. All sites having a clinical trial management system, CTMS, 77%. So these are all the technologies that are used quite often at the sites. Then we ask, what are you not using but plan to implement at your sites? E-consent was the top choice of 42% of sites, a 5% increase from 2019. What will be very interesting is what happened in 2020, because as the pandemic hit, more, of course, all of us were staying at home, especially in the big cities. We didn't want to venture out. Many of the visits still had to occur, especially in the oncology arena. Others, maybe the dermatology, the ones that were not life-threatening, we were able to pause. They were able to say, okay, that's going to take a back burner for just a moment. But e-consent really sped up. And we've seen it in my role at StudyKick, that we offer an e-consent platform. And these are great for those patients to say, hey, I want to participate in the study, but I don't feel comfortable, going outside. I don't feel comfortable visiting the site. The e-consent takes care of that, where they just sign from the comfort of their home or business or car or wherever they need to be. So e-consent was absolutely the top choice. And we've seen an increase, and we'll see an increase in wearables, in telemedicine, virtual visits. Of course, this will skyrocket when we have the 2020 survey go out. In 2019, 2020, 100% virtual decentralized trials. Were you approached from a site perspective for those? 80% said no. Yeah, 12% said yes, that we were approached. And an organization that focuses on sites, that is a little bit concerning to us, because if we go as an industry to too much of the decentralized trial aspect and don't have sites and don't have the option of having a principal investigator and patients, that's concerning. So we do need to find that medium to where, yes, we are still doing studies. We're still having patients go to sites where it's needed, but we're also implementing the telemedicine aspect to that. In 2019, 2020, were you approached by a sponsor or CRO to conduct a hybrid type trial? That's higher, 30%, and that's what we would advocate for, that there is a hybrid where sometimes the patients are seen at the site and other times they are seen at their home. What do you expect to be the biggest challenges for your site? And again, this was halfway, the pandemic was halfway through. Enough staff to implement home visits was the number one. So they say, hey, if the patients aren't going to start going to come to the site on every visit, we've got to have enough staff and knowledge and know-how to now go out and visit them at their home or work or wherever they may be. That's going to cost a lot of money. That's financial costs and compensation. Is the data quality going to go down? A lot of the sites are being told from sponsors that, hey, yeah, these 5 visits are going to be conducted at home, but you're not going to do them. We've hired a third party. Well, the PI is saying, hey, my signature still, I have oversight ultimately of that study. So do I trust that the study quality, that things are happening at the site level, are they truly going to follow the same SOPs and do what is needed at my site? So number 4, effectively supporting all technologies required for all studies and the training that entails, and then the time required to implement. So it is a major concern for sites. So we ask what you expect and then what you have experienced, and really kind of along the same lines, financial costs and compensations jumped up to number 1. Hey, this is a lot more costly than we thought it would be. We're supporting all these new technologies. Well, guess what? There's training involved. There's probably additional staff that needs to be hired. We now need a whole tech team, because if patients are frustrated with all these technology aspects that we're asking them to do, who do they call? They don't call the vendor that we're getting this tech from. They call the coordinator. So it's difficult for patients to participate. Staff we need to have training within the staff and the time required to educate. So I thought that was very interesting. kind of hearing from the site perspective. What are you doing now or planning to do to prepare for a trial with a virtual or decentralized component? And a third of the sites are saying we will do whatever is required because we need to stay in business. We're actively adapting technology. And Harshini, am I out of time?
Yes, more a minute.
Okay, all right. Let me, guys, I apologize. There was a lot to go through. Let me just leave with this. The top 3 responses when we look at participation in trials with virtual components. What can we do as an organization, and really what can we do as an industry? And I think most important is we need to develop best practices in this new world that we're in. We need to provide education on these technologies that we are expecting sites to enroll in. And we will continue actively advocating for the site voice. I think that is the one thing that we need to do now more than ever. We've gone through Congress and saying, hey, we need even that first round of vaccines. The researchers, the staff needs to be included in that, just not the nurses and doctors at the hospitals, but don't forget about the research industry. So for those of you, I know it's short on time, but feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you more. And I appreciate the time that we've had to get the site voice, because many times that's not heard. So thank you for allowing to hear it this morning.